Hello, friends, and welcome to Strange Stories of the Alaskan Triangle. I think you would all agree with me that there are certain areas of the planet that seem to be magnets for missing persons and mysterious disappearances. Vast, untouched wildernesses of sprawling forest, icy mountain peaks, and desolate tundra in Alaska, known as the Alaskan Triangle, has been at the center of over 16,000 disappearances since 1988. What is going on in this remote, unexplored wilderness that causes so many people to disappear without a trace? Is there a scientific explanation for why so many people go missing? Or is something more sinister happening? Now, a little bit about Alaska. Alaska is a vast desert almost of isolation and beauty, known for its towering mountains, rich oil fields, and extreme fishing in the Bering Sea. Among the vast, untouched wilderness of sprawling forest, icy mountain peaks, and desolate tundra are the unexplained stories of over 16,000 disappearances. In any given year, anywhere from 500 to 2,000 people go missing in Alaska, never to be seen again. Authorities conduct hundreds of rescue missions, but most often return without finding the missing person or any evidence at all. Accidental injuries are the third highest cause of death in Alaska, twice the national incidence rate. That statistic comes from the Alaska Division of Public Health. In addition to car accidents, this category of fatalities can also include people falling down mountains or slipping into the spaces between glaciers, also known as crevices. Of those accidental deaths, drowning is the third highest cause. Many times, the cold temperatures cause bodies to sink to the bottom of the water rather than float to the top, adding yet another challenge to finding missing people. Now, what exactly is the Alaskan Triangle? The Alaskan Triangle, first named in 1972, connects the state's largest city of Anchorage in the south to Juneau in the southeast panhandle to Barrow, a small town on the state's north coast. Roughly 1 in every 250 people that have vanished in Alaska did so in the Alaskan Triangle, and since 1988, there have been over 16,000 disappearances in this so-called triangle. Statistically, Alaska has more annual missing persons reports than anywhere else in the country, twice the national average. It also has the highest number of missing people who are never found. In 2007, for example, 2,833 people were reported missing, and when compared to the state's comparatively low population of around 670,000 at the time, that equates to about 4 in every 1,000 people, a staggering amount. Along with missing persons reports, state troopers oversee search and rescue operations. In 2007, they performed 42 missions related to overdue hikers, 85 related to overdue boaters, and 100 related to overdue snow machine operators who were temporarily missing. Those facts come from the Alaska Governor's Office. The Civil Air Service also assists with search and rescue missions, and Alaska's branch received the most state funding and saved the most lives in 2006 out of all other state branches. Now, let's delve into some of the more infamous disappearances from the Alaskan Triangle. First, the disappearance of House Majority Leader Hale Boggs and Representative Nick Begich. In 1972, two prominent politicians, House Majority Leader Hale Boggs and Representative Nick Begich, along with aide Russell Brown and Bush pilot Don Jones, mysteriously vanished in the region while on their way back from Anchorage to Juneau while flying in their Cessna 310 aircraft. An intense search lasted for 39 days, including 400 aircraft, an SR-71 Blackbird, dozens of boats, including 12 from the Coast Guard. The search area covered over 32,000 square miles, an area about the size of the state of South Carolina. No evidence of the plane was ever found, and the men were eventually declared dead. At the time, there were theories claiming the disappearance was orchestrated or covered up by then FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover in response to intense political struggles he had with Boggs. To this day, no trace of the plane or the men has ever been found. Next, 1986 UFO incident. In 1986, a Japanese plane was flying from Iceland to Anchorage when it came across 3 UFOs. The 3 unidentified flying objects followed the airliner for approximately 400 miles through the Alaska Triangle. The 3 unidentified flying objects followed the airliner for approximately 400 miles through the Alaskan Triangle. One of the objects was said to be twice the size of an aircraft carrier. The crew reported seeing flashing lights following their plane, and air traffic controllers also witnessed something unidentifiable on their radar that was reported as close as 5 miles to the plane. The pilot claimed that at one point, the two smaller ships appeared directly in front of the plane at pretty close range. He described the two smaller ships and the mothership disappearing and reappearing quickly, moving fast and stopping suddenly, which, of course, is impossible for a normal airliner to do. In order to escape the UFOs, the pilot received special permission from the ground crew to fly at a lower altitude while making several elusive turns to evade the objects, but nothing he did could evade them. After about 32 minutes, the UFOs disappeared, although the pilot claimed he thought the entire encounter lasted much longer than that. It's not uncommon in UFO encounters for a time to seem to stop, speed up, or stand still. Next, missing Douglas C-54 Skymaster, serial number 42-72469. In the 1950s, there was a military plane carrying an 8-man crew and 36 passengers. The plane lost contact with the ground and was never heard from again. There were 2 separate reports of UFO activity in the area at the time of the disappearance. One was a week before, and the other was 2 days after. The Army ended up conducting the largest military search and rescue mission at that time and found nothing. To this day, it's known as one of the largest groups of military personnel to ever go missing. Now let's talk a little bit about missing hikers and mountain climbers. First up, Richard Lyman Griffiths. Richard Lyman Griffiths from Spokane, Washington, invented a wilderness survival cocoon, and in the summer of 2006, he headed into the wilderness of southeast Alaska to test his invention. Oddly, no one reported him missing for a year. When authorities began searching for him, they learned a bus dropped off Griffiths along the Alaska Highway. He stopped at a lodge near the White River, where he left some of his gear and told people he planned to hike upriver to McCarthy, a small town in the Wrangell-St. Elias National Park. He was never seen again. Since Griffiths told friends he might spend the winter in Alaska, no one worried about him for several months. But finally, a friend called the Canadian Mounties and reported him missing. His friend had no idea where Griffiths was planning to go to test his wilderness cocoon. No trace of him or his bright orange cocoon has ever been found. Now, mountain climbing, as we all know, is a dangerous pursuit. In addition to Mount Denali, the highest peak in North America, Alaska boasts many of the most challenging mountains and glaciers any daring alpinist could hope to conquer. Mountain climbers die every year in Alaska, but most climbers ascend in groups. If 1 or 2 members of the group tragically fall into a crevice, their companions can tell the story about what happened to them. When a solo climber makes a fatal mistake, no one is there to record the details, and experts can only guess at what happened. One such climber, Naomi Uemura, a famous Japanese adventurer and mountain climber, decided to attempt a solo winter ascent of Denali in 1984. Uemura had already successfully summited Denali on his own, but he wanted to try a more challenging climb in the winter. He made it to the top on February 13, 1984, but something happened on his descent and he never returned to base camp. Conditions near the top of Denali when Uemura disappeared included high winds and a temperature of 50 below. Such brutal conditions leave little room for human error. More recently, on March 7, 2018, Ryan Johnson and Marc-Andre Leclerc, 2 experienced climbers, failed to return from a climb on a 7-peaked mountain near Juneau. In this instance, though, searchers found a clue hinting at the fate of the 2 men. They found an intact anchor rope at the top of an ice chute on one peak, and then saw 2 climbing ropes in a crevice midway down the same peak. A spokesman for the Alaska State Troopers said the evidence showed the climbers made it to the top and set an anchor. Then, she said, they were either taken out by an avalanche, a rope failed, or something else catastrophic happened. Paul Michael Lemaitre. 65-year-old Michael Lemaitre was competing for the first time in the 85th running of the Mount Marathon race, with participants running up the mountain surrounded by thick forests and creeks over 3.1 to 3.5 miles. Starting in downtown Seward, racers run a half mile to the bottom of Mount Marathon, then scramble about 2,900 vertical feet straight up cliffs and mud and shale before getting to Race Point, an artificial summit. Then participants go downhill over snowfields and rock fields waterfalls, and crags until they reached the finish line back on the streets of Seward. Tom Walsh, a race steward, saw Michael ascending to the turnaround point with about 200 feet to go. At this point, the area was getting foggy and cold, but Walsh saw no reason to be concerned about the condition of the runner. Walsh asked Lemaitre for his bib number, and he replied 548. And as he descended back towards the town, he texted race officials bib number 548 would be home in about an hour and a half. Unfortunately, that was the last time Michael was ever seen. Mountain rescue experts, firemen, state troopers, search dogs, and Michael's family spent thousands of combined hours searching the area without a single clue ever being found. And even after the official search was called off, volunteers continued to search the mountain, but to no avail. Now, what are some of the reasons that people think the Alaskan Triangle exists? One of the most common is the severe weather and harsh landscape. Alaska has vast swaths of remote wilderness. Over half of the entire nation's federally designated wilderness, recognized by the Wilderness Act passed in 1964, around 57 million acres of it are in Alaska, with even more that is not specifically designated as protected land, and much of this land is nearly completely untouched by humans. This harsh landscape is full of all manner of perils, including unforgiving weather, hazardous terrain, dangerous wild animals, and harrowing geological dangers, with Alaska being the home of around 100 active volcanoes. Considering this massive amount of rugged wilderness, which riddled with countless potential hazards, and the fact that many tourists come here to camp and hike are unprepared, it's perhaps no surprise that a good amount of people may become lost in the middle of nowhere, encounter some danger that incapacitates them and prevents them from getting back to civilization, or just simply killed by wild animals or the elements. Due to its reputation, parts of Alaska can get pretty toasty during the summer. Much of the state recently endured a stretch of temperatures you'd more commonly see in Minnesota than in Alaska. Fairbanks, a city that's geographically planted just right of center in the state's otherwise unpopulated wilderness, recorded 2 high temperatures of 88 degrees Fahrenheit earlier this month. The city has recorded highs of 80 degrees or warmer 10 times since June 1st. Average highs in Fairbanks range from the upper 60s in June to the mid-70s in July, normally. This month also saw the all-time record warmest temperature ever recorded so close to the Arctic Ocean, with a small town in far northern Alaska reached a daytime high of 84 Fahrenheit. Since warm, unstable air is the fuel that feeds a thunderstorm, talking about the warmth in Alaska helps us understand how common severe thunderstorms can be there. The state is no stranger to thunderstorms. During the heat wave earlier in the month, lightning monitors detected tens of thousands of lightning strikes across the state during the 2-week period. Cold weather, of course, happens too. Fairbanks dropped to 50 below zero for the first time in 5 years recently, with Anchorage climatologist Brian Brettschneider saying, triggering spooky ice fog across the city. Ice fog occurs when tiny ice particles are suspended in the air when temperatures fall lower than about 22 below zero. Now, is it possible that there are aliens in Alaska and within this triangle? According to the National UFO Reporting Center, since 1998, there have been over 560 reported UFO sightings in Alaska, with the majority of the sightings being in, you guessed it, the Alaskan Triangle. There are claims of a large alien base in Alaska. In his 1997 book, Remote Viewers, Jim Schnabel told the story of the U.S. intelligence community's involvement in the controversial issue of psychic spying that largely began in the early to mid-70s. Commenting on the skills of a talented remote viewer in relation to matters of UFO nature, one Pat Price, Schnabel noted Price was of the opinion that Alaska's Mount Hayes, the jewel of a glacial range northeast of Anchorage, housed one of the aliens' largest bases. According to Pat Price, the aliens that live deep inside Mount Hayes are very good-looking, differing only in their heart, lungs, blood, and eyes. Ominously, he added that the aliens use thought transfer for motor control of us. Price added, the site has also been responsible for strange activity and malfunction of U.S. and Soviet space objects. Rather notably, despite the controversial nature of this story, we find that the U.S. military took a great deal of interest in tales of UFO activity in Alaska in the formative years of the subject. For example, formerly classified FBI files tell of startling encounters with UFOs in Alaska in the period from 1947 to 1950. It was in August of 47 that a highly impressive account of UFO incident involving 2 serving members of the military was supplied to the FBI at Anchorage. The report began, "This is to advise that 2 Army officers reported to the Office of the Director of Intelligence Headquarters, Alaskan Department, at Fort Richardson, Alaska, that they had witnessed an object passing through the air at a tremendous rate of speed, which could not be judged as 2 miles per hour. According to the official report, the UFO was initially sighted by only one of the 2 officers, but he soon alerted his colleague to the strange sight. The object appeared to be shaped like a sphere and did not give the impression of being saucer-like or comparable to a disc. The first officer stated that it would be impossible to give minute details concerning the object, but that it appeared to be approximately 2 or 3 feet in diameter and did not leave any vapor trail in the sky. Being the experienced officer that he was, in his first attempt to gauge the altitude of the object and from a comparison with cloud formations in the area, he determined that whatever the nature of the mystery sphere, it was cruising at a height of more than 10,000 feet. And it should be noted that to be at such a height and still be visible, in all probability, the UFO must have exceeded by a wide margin his initial size estimate of 2 or 3 feet. When questioned, the second officer gave a substantially similar account, the only marked difference being that, in his opinion, he considered the object to have been approximately 10 feet in diameter and compared it to half the size of a full moon on an ordinary night. This discrepancy in size was apparently due to the fact that the second officer believed the UFO was more likely to have been at a height of 3,000 to 4,000 feet, rather than at an altitude of 10,000 feet, as had been suggested by his colleague. The difference of opinion over the altitude and size of the object may or may not have been of significance. The important factor, however, was that both officers agreed that some type of anomalous object had most definitely been spotted. And, as the report concluded, the second officer pointed out that one of the remarkable features of this report was that it was definitely traveling against the wind. Shortly afterwards, the FBI office at Anchorage reported to Bureau Director J. Edgar Hoover that we have been able to locate a flyer who observed some flying object near Bethel, Alaska in July 1947. The report to Hoover continued, "The pilot related that the occasion of seeing the flying object near Bethel was on a July day when the sky was completely clear of clouds, and it being during the early part, it is daylight the entire night. The time of his sighting of this flying object was about 10 p.m., and the sun had just dropped beyond the horizon. Flying weather was extremely good, and he was coming into Bethel Airport with a DC-3. On approaching the airport, the pilot was amazed to see to his left an unidentified craft the size of a C-54 without any fuselage," he says, which seemed to resemble a flying wing. As a result of its unique shape, the pilot was initially unable to determine whether the object was heading towards his aircraft or away from it, and elected to make a 45-degree turn in an attempt to defuse any possible chance of collision. The FBI noted that the pilot was certain that the craft was free of any external power source, such as a propeller-driven engine, and exhibited no exhaust as it flew by. The document adds, "He called on his radio to the Civil Aeronautics Administration station at Bethel, asking what aircraft was in the vicinity, and they had no reports of any. The object he sighted was some 5 or 10 miles from the airport before his arrival, and he stated that the path did not go directly across the airport. He, of course, could not tell where the object was making any noise, and stated that it was flying at a 1,000-foot altitude and estimated travel in excess of 300 miles per hour. It was traveling in the direction from Bethel to Nome, which is a northwesterly direction. He noted no radio interference and is unable to describe the color other than it appeared dark but of definite shape and did not blend into the sky, but had a definite, concise outline. He clearly observed the object at this time." As the 1940s drew to a close and a new decade dawned, the FBI continued to receive and log high-quality UFO reports on a regular basis. Of those, one of the more credible related to a noteworthy series of encounters that occurred in Alaskan airspace over the course of 2 days in early 1950. Forwarded to the FBI by an official U.S. Navy source, the confidential 3-page intelligence report paints a startling picture of multiple UFO encounters involving the military. Titled Unidentified Phenomena in Vicinity of Kodiak, Alaska. It concerns a report of sightings of unidentified airborne objects by various naval personnel on 22 and 23 January 1950. The author of the report noted, at 22-0240W, January, Lieutenant Smith, USN, patrol plane commander of P2V3 No. 4 of Patrol Squadron 1, reported an unidentified radar contact 20 miles north of the Naval Air Station, Kodiak, Alaska. When this contact was first made, Lieutenant Smith was flying the Kodiak Security Patrol. At 0243W, 8 minutes later, a radar contact was made on an object 10 miles southeast of NAS Kodiak. Lieutenant Smith checked in with the control tower to determine known traffic in the area and was informed that there was none. During this period, the radar operator, Gasky ALC USN, reported intermittent radar interference of a type never before experienced. Contact was lost at this time, but intermittent interference continued. Now, Smith and Gasky were not the only two to report that unidentified vehicles had intruded into Alaskan airspace. At the time of these encounters, the USS Tilbrook was anchored in the vicinity of Buoy 19 in the nearby Manship Canal. On board the Tilbrook was a seaman named Morgan, first name unknown, who was standing watch. At some point between 0200 and 0300 hours, Morgan reported that a very fast-moving red light, which appeared to be of exhaust nature, seemed to come from the southeast, moved clockwise in a large circle in the direction of and around Kodiak, and returned out in a generally southeast direction. Perhaps not believing what he was seeing, Morgan alerted one of his shipmates, Carver, to the strange spectacle, and both watched as the UFO made a return flight. According to the testimony of both Morgan and Carver, the object was in sight for an estimated 30 seconds, no odor or sound was detected, and the object was described to have the appearance of a ball of fire about 1 foot in diameter. The report then records yet another encounter with the mystery visitor. At 2:20-440W, conducting routine Kodiak security patrol, Lieutenant Smith reported a visual sighting of an unidentified airborne object at a range of 5 miles on the starboard bow. This object showed indications of great speed on the radar scope. The trailing edge of the blip gave a tail-like indication. Lieutenant Smith quickly advised the rest of the crew of the PV-23 number 24 that the UFO was in sight, and all watched fascinated as the strange vehicle soared overhead at a speed estimated to have been around 1,800 miles per hour. Smith climbed to intercept the UFO and vainly tried to circle it. Needless to say, its high speed and remarkable maneuverability ensured that Smith's actions were futile. However, neither Lieutenant Smith nor his crew was quite prepared for what happened next. Subsequently, the object seemed to be opening the range, the official report reads, and Smith attempted to close the range. The UFO was observed to open out somewhat, then to turn to the left and come up on Smith's quarter. Smith considered this to be a highly threatening gesture and turned out all lights in the aircraft. 4 minutes later, the object disappeared from view in a southeasterly direction. At around 0400 hours on the following day, Lieutenants Barrow and Causer of Patrol Squadron 1 were conducting the Kodiak Security Patrol when they, too, sighted an unidentified aerial vehicle. At the time of their encounter, the aircraft in which the officers were flying was approximately 62 miles south of Kodiak. For 10 minutes, Barrow and Causer, along with the pilot, Captain Paulson, watched stunned as the mysterious object twisted and turned in the Alaskan sky. An assessment of these reports read thus. Number 1, to Lieutenant Smith and crew, it appeared as 2 orange lights rotating around a common center, like 2 jet aircraft making slow rolls in tight formation. It had a wide speed range. 2, to Morgan and Carver, it appeared as a reddish-orange ball of fire about 1 foot in diameter, traveling at a high rate of speed. 3, to Causer, Barrow, and Paulson, it appeared to be a pulsating orange-yellow projectile-shaped flame with regular periods of pulsation on 3 to 5 seconds. Later, as the object increased the range, the pulsations appeared to increase to on 7 or 8 seconds and off 7 or 8 seconds. The final comment on the encounter reads, in view of the fact that no weather balloons were known to have been released within a reasonable time before the sightings, it appears that the object or objects were not balloons. If not balloons, the objects must be regarded as phenomena, possibly meteorites, the exact nature of which could not be determined by this office. The meteorite theory for this series of encounters is particularly puzzling. It goes without saying that meteorites do not stay in sight for an estimated 30 seconds. Meteorites do not close in on military aircraft in what is deemed to be a highly threatening gesture, and they do not appear as 2 orange lights rotating about a common center. In other words, it seems safe to conclude that genuinely anomalous phenomena were indeed witnessed by experienced military personnel at Kodiak, Alaska in January of 1950. Now, does any of this prove that there really is an alien base deep within Alaska's Mount Hayes, as Pat Price suggests? No, of course not. But in view of all the above, perhaps it's time to take a closer look at Price's claims, just in case. Now, in regards to Bigfoot, with the huge amounts of forests and uncharted wilderness, Alaska is certainly a perfect location for Bigfoot, also known as Sasquatch, to hide out. There are numerous reports of Bigfoot sightings throughout the entire state. Some reports include evidence of nesting sites, a possible Bigfoot skeleton, and unidentified hair samples. Some witnesses have even reported seeing a swimming Sasquatch during their encounters. Some villages have even relocated as a result of terrifying encounters with Bigfoot, which is surprising because the common understanding is that the creature prefers isolated areas and is in general quite peaceful. Peterson. There were stories told from 1900 to 1925 about a trapper that went into the woods near Peterson and disappeared, shortly after reporting exceptionally large tracks in the snow. The strangest story ever told by Virginia Culp documents this incredibly eerie encounter in further detail. In the town of Ruby, in 1943, it was reported that a man was attacked by an unknown creature in the wilderness about 18 miles down the Yukon from the town of Ruby. He later died of internal injuries, and the creature that attacked him, presumably a Bigfoot, was said to be run off by his dog team. Bristol Bay. In 1940, near the town of Kaluka, a group of ladies was berry picking when they reportedly came upon a large, man-like creature with long hair running down its back. They later went on to capture this creature, cage it, and feed it. It later died, and the story was documented in a letter from the alleged cage keeper. Ketchikan. This southwest town holds some pretty wild tales of the past. In 1956, about 50 miles southwest of Ketchikan, a man that was out fishing reported seeing an 8-foot-tall creature that was around 400 pounds and walked on 2 feet like an ape. There was also a young boy that reported a similar sighting nearby in 1960 and reacted to the encounter by screaming and running off as fast as possible. Port Chatham, also known as Portlock, this eerie small village on the Kenai Peninsula was home to so many Bigfoot sightings that the entire population eventually fled due to an overwhelming amount of fear. For a period of time during the 1900s, torn-up bodies were washing up on the shores of this small village, making the people believe that it had to be the evil Sasquatch spirits that roamed the woods nearby. Wrangell. Multiple Bigfoot sightings occurred in this area during the early 1900s. One includes a man that was berry picking in the woods and was awakened by the sounds of a massive man-like creature having a conversation nearby. Another story in the area is about a tall Bigfoot creature that actually ended up carrying a 3-year-old back to her home after she wandered off into the woods without anyone noticing her. Now, if Bigfoot is as confrontational as people in Alaska claim it to be, it's a possibility that this creature is perhaps the reason why some people go missing there, especially in the wilderness, if they have come face to face with it. Now, what about the energy vortices that are supposedly found in Alaska? The Alaskan Triangle comprises one of these so-called vile vortices, or geographical areas around the planet, postulated by American researcher and cryptozoologist Ivan T. Sanderson. Vile vortices are claimed to exhibit extreme electric, magnetic, and electromagnetic anomalies, as well as energy vortex called ley lines, which are theorized subterranean electromagnetic currents. The most famous vile vortices is the notorious Bermuda Triangle, but they are also said to exist in places as far-flung as the Algerian megaliths to the south of Timbuktu, the Indus Valley in Pakistan, Hamakulia volcano in Hawaii, the Devil's Sea near Japan, the South Atlantic, and both the North and South Poles. Various famous places such as Stonehenge, Easter Island, and the pyramids of Egypt are all said to lie on vortexes, and indeed it is claimed by some to be the reason these monuments were erected in the first place. These energy vortexes are said to create all sorts of strange phenomena. They are thought to affect humans in various physical, mental, and emotional ways, such as causing visions, demonstrating miraculous powers of healing, and generating spurts of creativity or profound epiphanies. Many people believe that they can tap into their higher selves while at these vortexes. These places can also allegedly induce disorientation, confusion, and both visual and auditory hallucinations, as well as cause delicate electrical instrumentation to go haywire or to completely malfunction. More far-out theories on energy vortexes are that they are actually doorways into spiritual dimensions, or maybe even gateways to other realms. All of these things could explain why people in vehicles such as ships or airplanes go missing in these regions at an astonishing rate. There are some interesting things that seem to support the idea that the Alaskan Triangle could be one of these vortexes. Alaska is covered with a large concentration of magnetic anomalies, some of which can disrupt compasses to the point that they are off as much as 30 degrees. In addition, some search and rescue workers in the area have reported having auditory hallucinations there, most commonly described as sounding like an angry swarm of bees and feeling unusually disoriented or lightheaded. Some readings of areas in the supposed Alaskan Triangle have indeed produced various unusual anomalies and spikes of electromagnetic activity. Could this have anything to do with the disappearances? Unfortunately, it's unclear whether such vile vortices even truly exist, and the theory has been open to a good amount of skepticism, so it is hard to say for sure. Something else in Alaska that may be responsible for taking people is what's known as the Tlingit shape-shifting demon. Now, there are many theories regarding all these disappearances in the Alaskan Triangle, and one of them include the evil spirits associated with the native Tlingit people who live in this area. These people are said to have origins dating back to 11,000 years ago. Their name, Tlingit, means people of the tides. These people believe that there is a shape-shifting demon named Kushtaka who is a cross between a man and an otter. It is said to lure people to their impending doom by attracting lost people to the water by portraying children or women who are screaming for help. It is also said that when the Kushtaka, also known as the Otter Man, captures these lost people, it then steals their souls. It is folklore that has never been proven, of course, but it's still a frightening thought, to say the least. Something else to consider in Alaska? Animal attacks. Although moose aren't more dangerous than bears necessarily in terms of behavior, they pose a greater threat of injuring you simply because of their population size. Moose outnumber bears nearly 3 to 1 in Alaska, wounding around 5 to 10 people in the state annually. That's more than the grizzly bear and black bear attacks combined. From 1997 to 2017, there were a total of 24 fatal bear attacks in North America. 4 of these were in Alaska. The average age of those attacked? 41. The youngest was 5 months old, and the oldest was a 93-year-old female. Overall, there are only 10 fatal bear attacks in Alaska if you count black, brown, polar, and grizzly bears. What about human predators? That brings us to the Nome serial killer. Around 2005, people began to notice that a large percentage of residents or tourists who went missing in Alaska happened to disappear from the city of Nome. In fact, the numbers became so worrying that rumors of a serial killer began to run rampant throughout local topics of conversation, totally ruining the vibe. This loud panic eventually caught the ear of the FBI, who came rushing in to investigate, eager to catch a murderer and show him off to their friends. But they didn't find one. Instead, they concluded that it was Nome's fault all along. You see, Alaska is known to have one of the highest ratio of alcohol-free municipalities in America. But Nome loves to party, which is the very reason why so many people flock to the city in the first place. So now you have a bunch of drunk visitors wandering off alone, into the woods to take a pee maybe, and then suddenly they get eaten by a bear, or stolen by aliens, or seduced by the Otter Man, or they simply pass out and freeze to death. So at this time, there has been no evidence supporting that there is a serial killer on the loose in Nome, Alaska. And then there's the popular Black Pyramid legend. While nobody really knows what this means or if it even exists at all, there's this obscure legend that a black pyramid twice the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza is buried beneath Alaska, around the Mount McKinley area. What's more, this tale came out as recently as 1992, which of course means it's got to be true. Just kidding. That year, on Anchorage's Channel 13, 3 scientists announced that they had accidentally discovered an unexplainable structure below the ground, which they located using seismic recording equipment. According to Douglas A. Muchler, geologists had used the detonation to undertake a seismographic study of the Earth's crust, only to find a pyramid structure larger than Cheops underground, somewhere west of Mount McKinley. Muchler recalls that the local NBC affiliates ran a story announcing the structure's discovery about 6 months after the detonation, but when he attempted to follow up with the station to get a copy of the story, evidently not part of his duties at Fort Richardson, they denied that the story had ever run and asserted that they certainly didn't have a copy to provide. Muchler then called relatives to track down copies of the story that had run on other stations, but apparently none had. The discovery only appeared on Anchorage's Channel 13. Muchler even wrote a letter to noted investigator of paranormal things Linda Moulton Howe, asking her about the pyramid under Alaska. The letter was as follows. My name is Douglas A. Muchler, CW2, USA, retired, and during my service tour in Alaska, I was informed of a pyramid under this land. There's other information concerning this that came to my attention after it was reported to us in 1992. I've tried to pass this info to others, but have not heard any response to my information. I assure you that I'm telling you the truth about this, and I think this is being kept quiet by our government, as the news was buried the very next day after it was brought to my attention. If you can help me get this info out to you, please call me so I can talk to you about this. He gives his phone number. The whole story is pretty interesting, and this can be verified with your contacts. I'm assured of that, as I do not have them and came up with 0 from the news people there. I'll tell you the whole story if you're interested. I've only contacted a couple of people, but have not heard back from any of them. I'm wondering if my emails are getting through at all, or if this is an old story that has no interest to reporters. Thank you for your time in this matter. Douglas A. Muchler. Now, since this finding, more and more retired anonymous military men have come forward, conveniently refusing to speak to anyone but famed investigator Linda Moulton Howe, telling her the secret story of some guarded black pyramid. In July of 2012, Linda Moulton Howe herself added to the mystery on late-night radio talk show Coast to Coast AM. That evening, Moulton Howe broadcast a pre-recorded interview with Doug Muchler, a retired U.S. Army counterintelligence warrant officer, she says, who provided many of the initial facts about the pyramid and first alleged the site's current connection with the U.S. military. From what we've heard, it's reported to be an architectural construction built by an ancient civilization, but with the power to generate enough electricity to supply not only all of Alaska, but most probably much of Canada as well. Some have even further speculated that this pyramid was built by Linda Moulton Howe herself in her mind to generate book sales. Well, there you have it, folks. What do you think of all these strange goings-on in Alaska? Do you believe in the concept of an Alaskan triangle, just like the Bermuda Triangle or the Bennington Triangle or the Nevada Triangle or any of these other strange triangles that we've discussed on here? I look forward to reading your thoughts in the comment section. We ask that you please be respectful of the opinions of others. In the meanwhile, be good to yourselves and each other. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time.